See, Bismarck, this is where I have to sound super serious.
Yes.
Like we're doing something really important. We gotta really sell it. Welcome back to our premium buying guide. In today's video, we'll be discussing Germany and Russian premium aircraft. How are we gonna cover two nations in one video? By calling in the Germans. Hi, Bismarck.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here, this time in a non-singing fashion.
So Bismarck is gonna help enlighten us and maybe teach us a few things about the aircraft we're gonna discuss.
Hopefully. We'll see as we go through.
Now, Bismarck, did you happen to know that we're a War Thunder affiliate?
Hey, it's a great, they save 3% and you get 3% for yourself. It's a great way to support the channel and save money at the same time. What's not to like about it?
You'd be a really good used car salesman.
Oh, thank you. I think you have a lot of those in the US.
So up first in the German tech tree, we have the premium BF-109A for 250 golden eagles.
Yeah, so essentially, in essence, this is where the BF-109 story begins, right? But at this point, I would caution against thinking that the legacy of the plane that you know guarantees that the BF-109A version will serve you well. This is a very early aircraft. It's powered by a Jumo 210, and the BF-109 line, I mean, even in reality, it doesn't really get going until you hit the E model. Yeah, the E1 or specifically the E3, the E4. Now, it's even a bit disputed whether the designation A ever really officially existed for the BF-109. It does get used a lot, but it's not quite sure whether it ever officially existed. But this is not the place to go into that discussion. And the A in-game essentially is the sort of the V3 prototype, or based on the V3 prototype. Now, in the colors it has there, of course, Spanish Civil War colors. It was flown by Norbert Flegel, and he had 4 aerial victories as far as I know, but he also crashed this plane. So there we go. Personally, I would say, the plane has, relatively speaking, insufficient power differential to the biplanes that you're going to be facing at this tier, and it has not a very high firepower profile. I mean, it's just 2 MG-17s, 7.92 millimeters. That's not very good, and overall I think the plane has a very high sort of skill step, and at this tier you're just getting started, so this is not sort of the best choice, I think, at this sort of battle rating.
Well, one of the reasons this plane is a little bit lacking is the wooden propeller. That being said, my personal opinion is that it's a really good plane if you want to learn how to energy fight. It's a 1.3, and it's going to have some of the characteristics of later BF-109s in terms of the way it flies. It's just going to be slower, and you're not going to go as fast, of course, but it may be a good plane for you to pick up if you want to learn the habits of what you need to do to be good in, let's say, a K4 later on the road. It'd be like a bike with training wheels.
I mean, you're going to suffer a little bit in it, I think. Definitely, if you fly this BF-109 like you would fly later 109s, you're going to be set up real nicely. But it is not sort of the most intuitive thing for a newcomer, I would say, in this game. So it's going to be a couple of tough matches, and once you get used to the aircraft, yeah, sure, it might serve you well.
For me, it's personally a buy. For 250 golden eagles.
I mean, for the price, yeah, sure, why not?
Up next, we have the HE-112B1U2, which is a Hungarian skinned aircraft. It is for sale in game for 550 golden eagles, but it does also come in the starter packs on Steam, War Thunder, PlayStation, Xbox for $5.99, and it'll come with this shiny, fun SD KFZ 141, 120,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium. The HE-112 was one of the competitors with the BF-109, and I think it's a pretty solid aircraft.
Well, Heinkel certainly thought so too, because he was so convinced in the qualities of his own aircraft that he started on his own initiative a production run of these, even though the German Air Ministry hadn't sanctioned their use yet, and eventually they would actually decide against the Heinkel 112 and for the BF-109. However, Heinkel did have quite a lot of success on the export market. He showed specifically the V9, on which the B1 is essentially based, to a lot of different countries, including Hungary. And Hungary even wanted to license build these. But ironically, even though I believe they wanted to buy around 30 of those, plus the license productions, would have seen that run maybe up to 100 aircraft. But ironically, from all the countries that bought the Heinkel 112, they received the fewest number, so they only got three in reality. And countries like Japan, Spain, and Romania got way more, but that's beside the point. Now, this is a plane that I personally, when I play War Thunder, go back to every now and then. You know, I like it. It's got a more powerful engine than the one in the tech tree, and it also sits at 0.3 higher in the battle rating. But yeah, I would say for the price, this is probably a really strong contender in the rank 1 lineup for the Germans. It's good to grind those lower tiers. It's a good planes. Just make your shots count. It doesn't have a lot of 20 mils, 60 rounds per gun. I don't see you having a lot of sort of use for it once you go higher up the tiers, but as an early plane and sort of as guilty pleasure to go back to every now and then, this is definitely something that I would recommend.
So the HE-112 is a very strong aircraft like he was talking about. The two 20mm MG FFs are the focus point of this aircraft. It's a really good turn fighter, handles really nice. It's a fun and forgiving aircraft. And for the price, I would say buy all day long. Up next, we have the Wellington Mk I for 1,000 golden eagles. The primary difference you're going to see with this one in the German tech tree versus the British one, this guy will lack some of the bomb loadouts. It's missing the 4,000 pound bomb, and also it's 1,000 pounders, which is kind of a big deal, so keep that in mind if you're thinking about buying this aircraft.
So this is based on a real Wellington that the Germans captured. This is based on TKX L7842 from 311th Squadron, Royal Air Force. And the Germans captured this aircraft and they test flew it at Rechlin, which was sort of their testing facility for all these foreign designs or also their own sort of prototypes. Now, it was captured on the 6th of February 1941 in France after attacking Boulogne. And the crew was, as far as I remember, Czech. So they weren't British. Now, personally, we might differ on this depending on, what your preferences are. But if you want to play a specific plane, I would say just go through the tech tree of that nation because you will probably get it for free. And as Bo said, there is the bomb load for this one is not the same as for the British original one, and that does change things quite consistently, I would say. Now, I did buy this back in the day when I started the game just to sort of have a casual bomber to grind with on the German line, but in the end I barely played this one. For me, it has less loadout options. There is the same version but better in a British tech tree just to play it through for free, essentially. Defensive firepower is relatively poor. Protection for the crew is relatively poor. 1,000 golden eagles. If you're really sort of a bomber guy, maybe, but it's going to be a strong maybe towards a no from me.
So it's very hard for me to judge this Wellington because it's in the German tech tree with a limited bomb loadout compared to the British one. I know that the German Wellington has a cult following and there's players that adore and fly this thing all the time. For me personally, it's going to be a wait for sell, just based on some of the options that you have in the tech tree. The FW200 is at the same battle rating, and it just doesn't get me excited enough to drop that 1,000 golden eagles. So it's a wait for sell for me. Up next, we have the IL-2 1942 for 850 golden eagles. This is a German captured IL-2 that has its cannons and its bombs, but no rockets.
As you said, an early version of the IL-2, so it has no tail gunner. It does have those 23 mils, which is not too bad. I would say, considering that it doesn't have rockets, but bombs does take away from it a little bit. But I thought about this a little bit, and it might be worth considering in the following situation. If you're a War Thunder player and you play a lot of tanks and you've got around 2.0, 3.0 in the German tank tech tree and you're trying to play there and you have no planes to go with you, but you need a ground attacker and you can't, for example, get the Bf-110C6 or something because it's on the marketplace, you might want to consider this one because the cannons can do some good work against lighter vehicles. And you still have bombs as a backup, I would say, almost. I would prefer to have those rockets, but that's just the limitation of what we have here.
Even though it may be lacking the rockets, for me, at 850 golden eagles, is still a really strong buy for ARB or ground forces. The IL-2 is a hell of a ground attacker. Those VYA 23mm cannons are nothing to laugh about, and the bombs are also nice secondary munitions to drop from it. So I think it'll do well in air, and it'll do well for you in ground. Very good utilitarian aircraft, we'll call it. Up next, we have the Yak 1B for 1,150 Golden Eagles. And to be frank, for that price, it does not get me excited.
Yeah, so this is sort of the improved version of the Yak 1, and it was developed because they got a lot of feedback from the pilots that was used to improve the plane, and then it was rushed into production in mid-1942. Overall, I would say as an aircraft, you can also fly this, of course, in the Soviet tech tree. It's solid at 3.0, and it sort of is a trendsetter for the Yakolev designs that follow. For the price that they're asking at 3.0, I mean, it's a tough one. It's on the high side. It's on the expensive side for what it delivers. And overall, I would say there is probably better alternatives. And, you know, if you definitely want to fly a Yak 1, just grind out the Soviet tech tree.
It's not a bad aircraft. It's just the price they're asking.
Yeah.
And it's not very unique. Doesn't give me any reason to recommend it to you unless you have a massive affinity for Yak 1Bs or something. So for me, it is a do not buy. Now we're on to the main event, the BV-238. This massive floatplane could be yours for 1,840 Golden Eagles. And Bismarck made a very strange noise when I said its name. Kind of unsettling.
I'm gonna start this off with a question. You know, how do you get 120 passengers across 8,600 kilometers? And the answer to that is you choose the Blohmen Voss 222, which is obviously not this aircraft. But the Reich's Air Ministry stopped that project in 1941 because it was meant to go through the Luftwaffe, right? And they did build a couple of those, but that's it. Now, Blohmen Voss, and this is why this aircraft is what it is, or was what it was, Blohmen Voss decided that, hey, if the Reich's Air Ministry is stopping the 222, which was already pretty big, then obviously it wasn't good enough and we'll have to make it bigger, because only then the Air Ministry can accept that. So that's the basic premise for the 238. They actually built this sort of miniature version. It's about the size of a very fat glider. It's called the FG 227 to test the concept, but it doesn't actually see any use because A, production of the 238, the plane that you're seeing, has already started before they actually start testing of this miniature version, and B, the first flight of the prototype doesn't happen apparently due to sabotage, but that's disputed. The construction finishes about March 1945, and the Luftwaffe is like, that doesn't look too bad, let's order some more. And while they're doing that, the prototype is sunk because Allied planes essentially swing by in a strafing run, and yeah, it was out on a lake, and it sank.
Real quick sidebar here. I've actually read where the Americans and the British both believe that they sunk this thing. I think it was strafed multiple times by different countries as pilots found it.
There are Spitfire pilots that are claiming it. There are P-51 pilots that are claiming it. It's possible that there was a mix-up as well with some of the other hydroplanes out there, but yeah, it's an interesting story, definitely. As Bo said, you know, it has it's massive, it's big, it's unique, it's one hell of a design, and it's definitely an eye-catcher. Every time I see this in the game, I'm like, oh, there's one of those, and you know, it certainly attracts attention. You've got good defensive firepower to deal with that attention if it should come your
You have
way.
amazing defensive firepower.
Yes, we can might as well say that. Amazing defensive firepower, and it's also pretty well protected. The only thing is you're a bit vulnerable from below, slightly vulnerable from below because of the gun coverage, but overall, you know, 1,840 Eagles, you're also buying something that is very unique, so you've got to factor that in. And overall, I would say this might be something to pick up.
Yeah, it's a very strong buy for me as well. Defensive armament, adds a very capable bomb load. There's nothing else like it in the game. You can see this thing across the map and recognize what it is because it's just so big and so unique. It's definitely worth adding to your collection, and it is something that you can get a lot of use out of. Up next, we have the LA-5FN for 5,250 Golden Eagles. I personally really like the LA-5s, but for that price tag, it almost gave me a stroke.
Yeah, I have the same. So overall, you know, you're taking a plane that you can have in the Soviet tech tree, and it has a massive price tag. It's, you know, it is a strong aircraft. The LA-5FN is not to be trifled with. It's one of my favorite aircraft of this sort of World War II era Soviet aviation. You know, it really is a strong contender performance-wise, but we're talking about essentially you having to take out a mortgage. I remember, Bo, I think you do as well, maybe, what was it, 1.35, 1.37, when these were dominating the sky back in War Thunder. That takes us back like 5 years ago or even more. And I think sort of the price is an artifact from back then. And overall, I would say this is completely overpriced. For this sort of money, you can get 3, 4, maybe even 5 planes out of the German premium tech tree. And you should consider those more than just this one plane.
I mean, let's be honest. We just mentioned the BV-238,
Yep.
which costs less than half of this and is a unique model. That's really cool. That's a really good aircraft.
Yep.
And then you have this thing for 5,250 Golden Eagles. As Bismarck mentioned, it's free in the Russian tech tree. It's a really good aircraft. The LA-5FN was a really neat World War II fighter. It has a lot of innovation. I like this aircraft, but I will just do so for free in the Russian tech tree, because for 5,250 Golden Eagles, you can buy a lot of other planes. And for that reason, it is a very strong do not buy. So we go from the LA-5FN at 5,250 Golden Eagles to the TA-154A1 for 1,450 Golden Eagles. That is a hell of a deal if you just compare it between those two aircraft. Which is again why I would say do not buy the LA-5. You could buy 3 of these.
Yeah, so the TA-154, just to give a quick history about this aircraft, this is sort of Germany's attempt at a Mosquito or at a Mosquito Hunter. It really depends on who you ask in the Rice Air Ministry. They didn't make their mind up. It's largely built from wood, and it was planned in 4 versions. Now the A1, in-game, I think it only has 1 crew member, but the A1 was, as far as I recall, actually meant to be a twin-seat day fighter. 250 of them were ordered, and production was stopped after like 10 planes. I would say for this price, you know, it's a good heavy fighter overall. It's got good performance, got good firepower.
So I have one question for you in a second, but I real quickly want to talk about this aircraft in game. The model and the textures were created by players, and it's part of the revenue share program. Mm-hmm. So a portion of what you buy goes back towards the players.
That's really cool.
That created this. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's made by the community. This aircraft has really great armament. It has 2 30mm Mk.100s and 2 MG-151 20mm. So really strong armament there. That's something to take note of. And it flies like a dream for a heavy fighter. I love this thing. It is one of my favorite German aircraft to fly. And for the price, it's going to be a buy all day long. I was told to pass something along to you, Bismarck.
Okay.
When you guys build wooden planes over in Germany,
Yes.
you want to use the good Elmer's glue, not the glue sticks.
We were operating on a budget. Yeah, sure. I mean, that's one of the big issues that the Germans had with this plane. So it was meant to go into production, and officially it went into production. Like I said, 250 of these were ordered. But after about 10 of them built, it was immediately sort of put on hold because, especially in the wing,
You can say
the
why.
glue-
The plane
Well,
fell
the-
apart.
well, yeah, the glue started eating into the wood, essentially. And you don't want that to happen because, well, your wood is essentially disintegrating. And at the speeds that you're operating with this aircraft, that's an invitation for a disaster. And as far as I know, they were on the verge of sort of solving the issue, but by that point, the war was over.
Really beautiful aircraft. Buy all day long.
Yes, 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 yes. In War Thunder, definitely, you don't have to worry about the glue, so there you go. And you're also supporting somebody who has actually made this aircraft.
So earlier today, when I recorded this video of Bismarck, I mentioned that the bubble canopy version of the P-47 would probably be disappearing at some point. Go figure, 5 minutes after I say goodnight to Bismarck, I get a message that says, hey, the German P-47 is being replaced by a Razorback P-47. Which is to be expected. This game is updated, or we're finding out new information every week about upcoming changes, which makes a guide like this sadly out of date pretty fast. So I'm going to real quickly talk about the plane that we have in game and the plane that is coming to replace it. And I real quickly want to clarify, when I say replace it, it means replacing in the store. If you own or are buying the P-47D that you see right here, you will keep it. But it will not be for sale moving forward. The Razorback will be taking its place in the store. That makes sense. So technically, you could own both these aircraft. The P-47D that you see right now is at 4.3 battle rating, and it costs 1,300 Golden Eagles. It's always been a very strong contender. It's a monster. It's an absolute monster. And if you ever had any interest in getting it, you should probably do it now. 850 cals, it does not include its bombs and rockets though that you see in the American tech tree. So keep in mind, this is primarily a air RB airplane or strafing with 850 cals and ground RB. No bombs or rockets. Want to make that clear. So buy now before it's gone. So what's coming to replace it, and I'll post what I saw in the forum today, is the P-47D 16RE. And it looks like it's going to cost maybe 50 Golden Eagles more. They also stated that it'll have a little bit less horsepower, and it has a little bit less armor according to the dev server. Not huge changes, but it looks like the bubble top canopy, of course, is going to be a little bit better, and it's going to be more rare and unique. So either way, I was going to recommend buy. And since Bismarck's not here, he said it was a buy as well. He also made statements such as American aircraft were better in every way. The P-47 was a marvel of technology that made the Bf-109 look like it was from the Stone Age. It's true, he said this. He said that American fast food is some of the best cuisine he's ever had, and he one day wishes that he could look as good as Americans do in their Levi's. He also made some statement about how good an R-2800 smells when it starts up in the morning. The smell of the American Midwest plain where the buffalo once roamed. I'm going to stop now before he murders me in my sleep. Up next, we have the HE-219A7, which is a super unique aircraft. You can pick it up in game for 2,980 Golden Eagles. And this is, I believe, the first aircraft that was part of the revenue share program that has a model and texture that was created by the community.
History of this aircraft, it actually goes back to 1940, sort of as a long-range recon aircraft operating at high altitudes, and the Germans realized when the RAF especially switched to night bombing that the Germans needed a night fighter, and although they were using the Bf-110 and some of the Ju-88s for that, they really needed a dedicated machine for that purpose. So they took the Mk 219, they were like, we're gonna try to convert this to night defense, and they did, and they rushed the first models into combat, and it turned out this aircraft did that really, really well. So the Germans were like, right, let's build roughly 1,200 of these. And in the end, they, for various reasons, they only built 300, but still, this is a super unique aircraft. You know, it looks unique, the history is unique, and from a sort of combat perspective, I would say it's a bit more sluggish, but probably more deadly than the TA-154 from earlier. It's also double the price. You gotta keep that in mind, but it's at the same battle rating, although 1 tier higher. It does come with HVAP for the Mk103s, and those cannons and this aircraft has been one of the banes of my existence in ground combat, because they are fast, they just swoop in, they shoot up your tank, and they just ruin your day. So overall, I would say this is, you know, unique plane, strong contender.
As much as I like the TA-154, this is the way better aircraft for ground RB.
Oh yeah, for ground RB, absolutely.
For me, the HE-219 is worth the price tag because it's pretty good in air RB, and it's devastating in ground RB, so you may actually get more use out of the HE-219 for the higher price.
Double the price, but also double the versatility.
So the primary differences between this and the TA-154, and personally I would pick up both, but if you had to decide on one, the TA-154 is a way better plane to fly. It rolls better, it turns better, it's just a better dogfighter. Now the HE-219 has that extra set of cannons, the two Mk103s, which are no laughing joke. As Bismarck mentioned, they get HVAP. Those things will shred a large majority of the tanks that they see in ground RB. And if you want to pull head-ons in ARB, this thing will shred anything that gets in its path. So just keep that in mind when you compare the two. But the HE-219 is a much harder aircraft to fly. It does not like to turn around. It does not like to maneuver very well. So the TA-154, I would say, is a lot more in the agility stats, while the HE-219 is more in the power stats, if that makes sense, or the damage stats. The HE-219 gets a very strong buy from me. The Air and Space Museum actually just finished restoring one of these not too long ago, and I believe it is still sitting at the annex available for public viewing. Up next, we have the FW-190 D13, which is available at the War Thunder store, PlayStation, and Xbox for $29.99. Comes with 1,000 Golden Eagles and 15 days of premium. The D13 used to devastate all back in the early days of War Thunder, like 1.29, 1.31. This aircraft used to destroy everything in its path. Since then, there's been several flight model changes. It's kind of lost its edge, I would say, but it is still a very, very capable aircraft in game. I would, though, caution you to not pick it up unless you are more of a experienced player, a veteran player. You don't have to be super experienced, but I would not recommend it as a buy for somebody who's just starting out.
I would concur with you there. This is, of course, FW-190. It's a high-altitude version with a liquid-cooled Jumo 213. I bought this pack myself back in the day. I think it was the first purchase I ever had in War Thunder, and I never really sort of thought, I shouldn't have done that. I always was happy with it. Now the D14, compared to the Doras that are in the tech tree, it's sort of a middle of the road there. I'd say actually that it's perhaps the best one out of the three out there overall. That's a point of contention between what your preferences are for these aircraft.
Well, this one has the 3 20mm cannons, which gives it a slight advantage over some of the others.
It does not have the 30mm, but 3 times 20mm is not bad, and it has pretty good ammo capacity there as well. But high performance, it has good firepower, and if you are a German main, and if your main line is Germany and you want something at that tier to grind out or just to have a lot of fun in, then this is an aircraft you want to pick in. But if you're just starting out with Germany and you're not yet sort of aware of how you should fly those German planes, then you need to be a little bit careful. If you learn a lot, you can learn a lot with this aircraft, but you also need to be aware of what you have to do. So, you need to fly it like it's supposed to be flown. You need to use the vertical, you need to pick your lines, use that rollway to maneuver, and then it's an absolutely exceptional aircraft. But just be aware of these things.
Even though its stock might have gone down since the early days of War Thunder, it's still a very strong buy from me. As Bismarck and I mentioned, though, if you're just starting up the German tech tree, please go through the process of learning how to fly the BF-109 and the FW-190As before you make the jump into the Dora 13. But in the hands of the right pilot, this plane can still be a strong competitor, and I don't feel like they're asking an unfair price for it. Up next, we have the DO-335B2, which is endgame for 4,880 Golden Eagles. This aircraft does come with 3 Mk-103 30mm cannons and 2 20mm MG-151 cannons. It's a very punishing armament. It has that very unique 2-engine, 2-propeller setup, 1 engine in the front, 1 in the back. It's a pretty unique aircraft, and it can be very tempting for a new player. But let me play devil's advocate. This thing can be pretty difficult to fly. It likes to, and I don't want to use the term, but I'll use it, lawn dart. This thing has a lot of compression, so if you like to dive down at high speeds and try to energy fight with this thing, you have to be very careful because you can easily lock up and fly straight into something. I've done it a few times. Where this guy really shines, though, I would say, is in Ground Forces RB. It's very devastating as a ground attacker. And for bomber hunting. It's very good at that. So you can find good uses for it in ARB and in Ground Forces.
Yeah, I would concur with you there. Overall, of course it's a unique plane. I could talk about the history all day long, but overall, I also see sort of the main use for people that have this aircraft in ground RB. I see it a lot in ground RB, and every time you see it and every time it starts opening fire, something explodes. And in ARB, also against bombers, of course, like you said, absolutely devastating. It has a high price tag, so for new players, I think just hold off a little bit there, get your feel for the game, see what you like, see what you sort of prefer in the game, and then if this aircraft really sort of tickles your interest, might be something you want to pick up. And of course, there's a lot of players that already have this aircraft that are invested in the game. That makes perfect sense. But for myself, at that price tag, I wouldn't buy it for myself. I would have to be honest about that.
Unless you absolutely need this aircraft for ground RB, or if you really want to do the bomber hunting thing, I would say buy. Otherwise, it'll be a wait for sale for me. It's nice to pick up for your collection. It's just tough at that price for me to give it an absolute yes. So one of the reasons that the DO335 is a wait for sale for me is the GAU-2A8C, and that's our next aircraft. It's in game as well for 4,880 Golden Eagles, and man, is it a beautiful machine. You know what's one of my favorite things about Bismarck?
Please tell me.
2 1,800 kilogram bombs.
Oh yeah, that would do it, absolutely.
Which is fantastic for air RB, and even better in ground forces RB. This thing is quick, it flies like a dream, has fantastic defensive armament. I didn't realize I needed this aircraft in my life. It is my go-to ground RB aircraft every time. This thing drops a huge bomb very accurately.
Since you sort of covered the game part, I'm just going to very quickly run through the history. This was actually a replacement project for the Ju-88s and the Dornier 217s that started in 1939, sort of as a modern take on a medium bomber by Junkers, or Junkers, depending on which German pronunciation you want to go to. And they wanted actually to have these done and built in 1942. Of course, in that year, the Jumo 222 engine wasn't ready yet, so hooray, Daimler-Benz engine had to be used, the 610, and this was a little bit of an unhappy marriage, but with the C version that we have in the game, yeah, I mean, that was never really built except for a pre-production series, but all those issues that the Germans had with the plane have absolutely no relevance in War Thunder, because in this game, this plane works really well.
I might love it a little too much, but it's a strong buy.
It is a high price tag, so
it makes me smile.
It makes you smile, and if this is something you really want and need for your lineup, then this is probably an investment you will make.
Up next, we have the Tempest Mk V, and I'm going to have to hold Bismarck back a bit, I think, but it is in game for 7,100 Golden Eagles. I'll say that again, 7,100 Golden Eagles for a Tempest Mk V. It does not come with its bomb loadout. It does have its 4 20mm Hispano Mk Vs. This is going to be, this may get ugly. But before we attack it for the price, Tempest Mk V is a really pretty aircraft. It's a beautiful piece of British engineering.
Oh, I mean, the plane as it was is absolutely amazing. Yeah, I like it. In fact, I recently filmed one, and it was amazing to get close to one and, you know, to see how it looks and to sort of go into the gear well and smell it a bit. Sorry, I'm being a bit weird, but that's what I do. That's my job. I really like this aircraft, but considering the price tag, plus considering there's one over there in the British tech tree, in sort of the colors that it was used in during the war, I'm gonna say this is probably not a buy for me. I mean, 7,100 Golden Eagles, we're approaching a territory where you could build a whole lineup of premium aircraft for that price. And I'm really hesitant to say anything about this beyond perhaps wait for a steep discount. But that's about as positive I can be about that price. I'm sorry.
Even at 50% off, it's still expensive.
Oh, yeah.
As much as I love the Tempest Mk V, I'm going to have to say do not buy just because of that astronomical price tag.
Yeah.
Up next, we have the Hawk Mk.100. And you can pick it up at the War Thunder store, PlayStation, and Xbox for $49.99. It'll come with 2,000 Golden Eagles and 15 days of premium. I have very mixed feelings about this premium, and I'll real quickly go through it. It's at a battering of 8.0. It does have air-to-air missiles, which is something to take note of, and it does have a pretty good ordnance layout for ground RB. The aircraft itself in game, I feel, is just a little bit lackluster. It's nothing to get excited about, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It flies well enough, it maneuvers well enough, it's a little bit slow, and if it gets up tiered, it really kind of likes to struggle. I don't know, I just can't get excited about Bismarck. Maybe you can help me.
Oh, I can get excited about this one. Absolutely. So this is one of those planes that essentially set up the founding of the new West German aviation corps within the army. So very quickly here as well, this was not a Luftwaffe plane, this was for the Navy. And in the 1950s, when the new German army was founded, they obviously needed new aircraft and fast. And this aircraft, which they got from the British, was relatively cheap. It was available, and it was available quickly, and Germany had nothing else. So this aircraft was chosen. There's the Mk 100 and there's the Mk 101. The Mk 100 that we have in the game right here, this is the all-weather variant. Excuse me. The Mk 100 that we have in the game is the good weather variant, whereas the Mk 101 is the all-weather variant. And they're essentially identical to the British FGA 6, albeit they do have a slightly bigger vertical stabilizer and rudder, but that's really just a detail. And I am really sort of a sucker for these sort of early Cold War aircraft, and I really like sort of also the history of the formation of the new Luftwaffe and also of the Marineflieger of the Navy, which don't exist anymore. And I am really, really tempted to say this is a plane that deserves to be in your collection. But considering the price tag, considering that for the average consumer, it's probably nothing to get excited about. And what Bo said about how it performs in games being just slightly lackluster there, think twice before you buy this one, because for most people, it's probably just going to be as it is for Bo, because I'm a bit strange.
If it was at 7.7, it would be a buy for me. I'll be honest. At 7.7, I would highly recommend this thing. At 8.0, it's just tough for me to give that stamp. It's if you get it for sale, it's a strong addition to your lineup. One of the things that really keeps me, though, from saying buy on this guy is the G91R4 we're going to talk about in a minute. Mm-hmm. And if you had to pick up a premium jet, I strongly feel that the G91R4 is where your money should go. And now on to the main event, the G91R4 and that crazy paint scheme I love so much. So the G91R4 is available in-game for 8,910 Golden Eagles. And let's real quickly get into the details about it. The munitions that it carries is really where it shines. It can carry 4 AIM-9Bs or 2 AA-20 Nords. Actually, let's take a step back a minute. I'm going to try to explain to you the differences between the G91R4 and the German G91 that you'll find in the tech tree. So the premium R4 will have the anti-air options that I just gave you. It does have 50 caliber armament, and it does have 2 ATGM Nords. The tech tree variant will have 2 30mm cannons, no air-to-air missile options, but will carry 4 ATGM Nords, 2 more than the premium one does. I hope that makes sense, and that's something you may want to consider if you want to buy the premium or use the tech tree variant. Those ATGMs that I have died to so many times, I'll be just standing there having a nice day looking around at my Abrams, and all of a sudden ammo rack fire, panic, confusion. Yep, G91's on scene.
I love the Fiat G91. I have a whole inside the cockpit video about this aircraft even, so if you want just the history of this aircraft, go and watch that. But yeah, I really like this aircraft. You could consider it back then even what we call nowadays sort of a light attack aircraft. It was really just built to go up close to the front lines, hit a point, land, rinse and repeat, and was very heavily influenced by sort of the Eastern Front combat and operational conditions experience that both the Germans and the Italians had gained during World War II. Now, as how it performs in game, this version does sacrifice a little bit of that ground pound capability, but it gets that air-to-air capability, which it does a lot better than the Tech Tree G91. So If you want just a versatile, really good aircraft, and if you want something to sort of grind through your high-tier German jets, and you want something that you can take into both air-ground and air-air, then this might be worth picking up. It is expensive, and that's the only sticking point that I have, but if you are really invested in this game, this is probably your go-to for the German tech tree.
When I knew I was going to do this video, I decided to spend some more time on the G91R4, and I ran a whole bunch of AirRB matches because that's where I really wasn't sure if the G91R4 was worth it for AirRB. It's not the fastest aircraft in the world, especially when you face 9.7s or 9.3s or any of those afterburner jets, or any of those jets with afterburners. But man, this thing flies so sweet. It's so maneuverable. It's a great dogfighter. Those air-to-air missiles really help it out at that battle rating. The thing that I hear it get knocked on quite a bit is its 50 caliber machine guns, and I found those serviceable. I didn't have a lot of issues like I expected. It's a good aircraft for ARB and in Ground Forces RB. Just keep in mind, it has 2 less ATGMs than the G91R3, but you do get those AA missiles. If you need something to go with your Ground Forces lineup, or you just want a premium jet to help grind out your top tier stuff, this is an absolute buy. I can't find any reason to knock on the G91, and I've died to it so many times that it's earned my respect. Up first in the Soviet tech tree, we have a British aircraft to discuss, the Hampden TB Mk I, which is available in-game for 1,370 Golden Eagles at a battle rating of 1.7. That's a really tough plane for me to recommend to you, just because I feel like that's a little expensive for that battle rating. The positive things about this aircraft is going to be its payload. It can carry 4 1,000-pound bombs, 6 500s, or 4 1,000s and 2 500s, and it can carry a torpedo. I'd honestly just say wait for sell. I want to love the thing. It's just a little bit slow. It's difficult to fly. I usually get smacked around in these things when I fly them. I want to love them so bad.
I sort of have the same experience as you with them in game. I really want to like them because I do like the Hampden, and it's the only sort of British bomber that did anything on a reasonable scale on the Eastern Front as well, which is sort of a historical trivia point towards the aircraft. And another trivia point, actually, when the Air Ministry put out specifications for this aircraft to the industry, the prefix actually designates it as a heavy bomber, not what we would call it now, sort of a medium bomber-sized aircraft. On the history here, there was actually a first batch that was sent over to the Soviet Union in mid sort of 1942, not as Lend-Lease, but to operate sort of in the Murmansk area in order to protect convoys from the German Navy. This is why those aircraft have those torpedo capabilities, and to deter submarines, mainly with bombs, of course, not with torpedoes. Of the initial batch that was sent, only about 3/4 actually arrived, because most of them just crashed or got shot down on the way. And they only flew one mission, and then the Brits said, okay, well, this is not working out for us, and they just handed them over to the Soviets. And within a year, the Soviets had lost all their Hampdens because of the operational conditions. And Bo, you said, I really want to like this aircraft, and it does have a strong point in the way that its bomb load is a little bit more capable than what you find in the tech tree of the Soviets, but it is somewhat overpriced for what it gives you. And yeah, wait for a sale for this one if you like it from a historical standpoint, and if not, then just avoid.
You have to wait for sale for me. It's a unique aircraft. It's got enough positives about it. This 1,370 is just too steep. After that, we have the Catalina, the PBY-5a, the one with the wheels. It's got the landing gear. It can land on land.
Yeah.
It's in-game for 880 Golden Eagles, and is also at a battering of 1.7. And this is a plane I really struggle to give a recommendation on, because Catalinas have always been a really fun part of our War Thunder time. In failure and in success, this plane creates a lot of laughter. It's not the easiest plane to fly, and I would hate myself if I recommended it to new players, because it's got its limitations. And if you try to dive too hard, if you try to turn too hard, she will punish you. It has some good defensive armament, has a good payload. You can land in the water, you can fly upside down. You'll have some laughs with it. And for me, it's a wait for sell. Or if you just want to add it to your War Thunder collection, I completely understand why.
it's gonna be tough if you're a new player. This is not sort of the plane for you there. I love the Catalina, just like Bo, yeah. We are biased on this, yeah, just because of how much we appreciate the Catalina. But I would say, yeah, it's a bit expensive, even though I love this thing. And for me, I bought this aircraft because I bought it out of love rather than being rational about it. What I would say sort of about the history about this, just to expand a little bit about why the Soviets had this aircraft. One of the things the Soviets didn't have enough during World War II was sort of modern hydroplanes. They start out with like 900 hydroplanes in 1941, and they're down to like 300 by 1944, and they don't really have an influx of new aircraft. Now, before the war, they already have what they call the Gydro Samolyot Transporti, and that's a GST, which was essentially a PBY-1. And they liked those, and they wanted more, so they approached the Allies to get a deal to have more sent over for Lend-Lease. And while they're doing that, they actually retake a factory near Taganrog, which is near Rostov on Don, which is sort of roughly in the Crimea area. And they wanted to resume production there of their old license-built aircraft. They don't end up doing that, going for the B6 instead. We're going to talk about that plane later on. But they still receive quite a few PBYs and rather PBN1s, Nomads, from the Allies as well. So, yeah, the Soviets definitely appreciated this aircraft. I really like the Catalina. It is something you buy because you love it, and perhaps not something you buy because you need it, because you probably don't. And like Bo said, it's going to not really the most intuitive bomber to use. So wait for a sale.
Up next, we have the I-153 M62 Premium, which you can find in-game for 250 Golden Eagles. It will also come in the starter pack, which is available on Steam, War Thunder, PlayStation, Xbox. On Steam, War Thunder, and PlayStation, it's $7.99, and on Xbox, it's $5.99. These packs will also come with the T-126, 120,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium. This aircraft is a little demon. Since Bismarck and I first started playing War Thunder, this thing has been insane in terms of maneuverability. It's quick for its battle rating. It's got really good firepower. This thing's like an aerobatic aircraft. It might as well be painted Red Bull on the side. The premium version is named after a pilot that I will probably mess up his pronunciation. Zhukovsky was a highly decorated pilot. I'm going to read some of this off. It's insane. You ready for this, Biz?
Oh, yes.
Was awarded with the Order of Lenin, 6 Orders of the Red Banner of Labor, the Order of Alexander Nevsky, the Order of the Patriotic War First Class, 2 Orders of the Red Star, and 16 medals. He flew over 500 sorties. He eventually retired from the Soviet Air Force as Colonel General of Aviation.
Well, that's an impressive resume.
Really strong plane, comes in really strong starter packs. It's a buy for me. The Chaika's insane. It's probably the most forgiving plane for a new player to start in.
I can actually add nothing to that. I have exactly the same opinion. It's a solid low-tier aircraft. It's forgiving. It's fun. It's very competitive. And yeah, you're probably going to have a lot of usage out of this one, considering also the competitive pricing.
Ironically, after that, we have the I-153P for 950 Golden Eagles at a battering of 2.7, which is a Chaika that they decided to shove 2 20mm Shavak cannons in. Because the plane's not devastating and scary enough, now you gotta give it 20 mils. It also has 4 50-kilogram bombs and 8 rockets. Forgot to mention the 2.0 one, the I-153 M62 also gets rockets, of course. Because why not have more armament on these biplanes, right?
Oh yeah, why not?
This is a really strong plane in game. I will give one piece of advice or one expectation. It is really slow. So if you are going to fly it, you have to have the mindset of trying to ambush or lure people into a turn fight. What I like to do is I kind of like to loiter at mid to low altitude, kind of play dumb, kind of play lost, get something to jump me, and then you bite its head off like a snake. You will not be able to chase down and catch P-40s or any other faster single-engine fighters, typically. Not saying all the time, but for the most part, you won't catch most of the aircraft that you see. But if you can lure them into a trap, they go, oh, look, it's a biplane, and you make them pay.
Yeah, so while the previous Chaika is sort of the heavyweight at its battle rating, this one you have to be a little bit more smart. It has quite a lot of firepower to its name. and I have this plane, and I have a lot of fun with this aircraft. But at this sort of tier, you are starting also to see the first sort of people that know really how to counter biplanes. So your mileage will vary also depending on who you're facing. Overall, just follow Bo's advice. Play a little bit dumb. Try to bait people into a situation.
Don't play dumb. You want to make them think you're dumb.
Yes, of course. I mean, you know, obviously you're not dumb. You're going to trick them, but you you want to be a very inviting target, but be hyper acute of your situation and of what's going on around you, and then this plane will be a nasty surprise for anyone who thinks, oh, it's a biplane, I can just bounce it and have an easy kill, because it is not an easy kill if you use this plane to its abilities.
It is a very strong buy for me.
Yeah, I would say it's a buy for me as well.
Up next, we have the I-16 Type 28. It's available in-game for 1,350 Golden Eagles, and is also at a 2.7 battle rating. This is a iShack that they fitted two 20mm Zhukovsky in the wings. It also has two 7.62mm machine guns in the nose. Very strong armament. It will also come with its rocket payload, two 100kg bombs and two 50kg bombs. Now, this aircraft was super unique because it was the only Canon I-16 in-game for years. But a while back, they did add the Type 27. So there is a similar variant in the game for free. I just want to put that out there before we talk about it.
Yeah, so this is the late production I-16 with 20mm cannons, like you said. And that was sort of added in the attempt to get more out of the plane. But it certainly, during the real war, started to be obsolescent. And when the I-16 was new, it was the first of many things. And during the Spanish Civil War, it was a very competitive aircraft. But even before Operation Barbarossa, so 1941, Soviet pilots already said, the I-16 has lost its competitive edge. I still think overall the plane performs fine in War Thunder, but I would say there are better and cheaper options for you out there, considering also that this aircraft, you can essentially get a carbon copy of it in the tech tree. It is more expensive than the Chaika, and personally I would say the Chaika is probably going to be a lot more fun. So maybe on a discount, but probably towards a no for me.
Originally, this airplane would have been a buy for me, but since you get the Type 27 for free, it's going to be a wait for sell. I love this aircraft. It's a lot of fun. I have nothing negative to say about it. For 1,350 Golden Eagles, I would save that, use it for something else, and fly the Type 27 if you want that experience. Up next, we have the Lend-Lease P40E1, which is available in-game for 700 Golden Eagles. It has 6 M250 caliber machine guns as armament. It's got that American firepower biz. And it also has bombs. It can carry one 500 or a 250 with two 100s. I personally like this Russian P40 for Air RB and for ground forces. I feel that its bomb load is capable enough at 2.7. It's a good aircraft. I have nothing negative to say about the P40E. It's always been a favorite of mine.
P40, awesome aircraft. The sort of the history about this one, I mean, the Soviets really liked the sort of early P40s. They got diverted from the British. So the British had sort of 300 in order, and 100 of those went to China, 200 to the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union said, well, except for their performance, we really like these, so we're going to use them as air defense fighters and sort of against bombers around Moscow and then Leningrad. And because of that experience with the early P40s, they also wanted to have the later models, for example, the P40E that we have here. Of course, by now the plane has undergone some changes, so historically speaking, the Soviets weren't that interested in it anymore, considering that it became more sort of a fighter bomber, whereas the Soviets wanted to use it more as a fighter. And it was a little bit too heavy in their mind. But considering that this is War Thunder and 700 Golden Eagles, it is cheaper than the Chaika. It is definitely cheaper than the I-16. I have it and I have a lot of fun with it. So I would say if you know how to fly a P40, definitely consider picking this one up. I had a lot of fun in this aircraft, but you have to be mindful of sort of the limitations of this aircraft. And once you have mastered it, this is going to take you many, many places.
For 700 Golden Eagles, it's a buy for me. You can use it in ground RB, you can use it in air. You can get a lot of mileage out of it for a very fair price. Up next, we have the Hurricane Mk IIB for 700 golden eagles. It has two 20mm Shavak cannons in the wings. It also has two Soviet 12.7mm machine guns in the wings as well.
So yeah, the history behind this is quite interesting because, of course, Stalin goes over to the Brits and says, hey, we need new fighters. Please give us your Spitfire that we heard so much about. And the British turn around and say, well, we can't really give you Spitfires or a whole batch of Spitfires. But what we can do is we give you 50% Spitfires and 50% Hurricanes. And Stalin then turns around to his own guys and says, well, this is a deal that we should take, right? And then they talk a little bit and then they realize, actually, having two different aircraft and having two sort of logistical infrastructures set in place for those aircraft is going to be more of a drain than having a single aircraft. So he turns around again and says, I just want Spitfires. And the Brits say, no, you cannot have Spitfires, only Spitfires. At that point, he says, okay, I'll take the Hurricanes. These ones, actually the first time the Soviets get to see a Hurricane is, funnily enough, in March 1941. And it's the Germans that show it off to them. And the Germans say, well, this is a British fighter and it's completely obsolete. Or when Germany, of course, invades the Soviet Union, it doesn't really matter whether it's obsolete. You just need to have some aircraft. They were the first sort of planes that were sent over from Britain towards the Soviet Union, just like the early P-40s I talked about earlier, around 200 Hurricanes. And a little bit of trivia here. Most of these Mk IIBs were actually flown by British pilots at first, just like the Hampdens, in and around Murmansk. And the Soviet Union actually said, well, if these pilots are going to fly around here and shoot down German aircraft, then we also want to pay them sort of the bonus pay privilege. That is, getting awarded a bonus payout for every single downed German aircraft, just like Soviet Union pilots. And just to put that into perspective, a single confirmed kill was essentially 2 years worth of your pay for one of these British pilots. And the RAF heard about this proposal and they said, no, we refuse because this is insulting to sort of our pilots' professional honor. I'm not sure if the pilots saw it that way as well, but oh well. Eventually, the Hurricanes do get fully transferred over to the Soviet Union, and here I link up again with what Bo said. They start to modify them, sometimes a bit, sometimes a lot. There's even one that had like a backseat in there with a gunner for artillery spotting and so on. And you also have these versions here that have Soviet armament. 700 Golden Eagles, I'm a little bit undecided simply because we have the P-40 at the same price tag, and I would say the P-40 is perhaps the more sort of solid buy for myself and the way I use these aircraft. But if you're undecided, if you really like Hurricanes, if you really like British aircraft, then maybe go for the Hurricane. But overall, for most players, I would say wait for a sale.
I'm going to disagree with you.
Ooh.
And here's why.
Ooh.
This aircraft is kind of a sleeper, I would say. I think a lot of people underestimate it. I know she doesn't look like much from the outside, but that armament really kills an ARB. It's a really good turn fighter, has a lot of wing loading, does a lot of sharp turns at low altitude. It'll surprise a lot of people. And man, that armament, I can't just say enough good things about the armament. That armament really hurts. So for me personally, I'm going to tend towards its buy. I really like this aircraft. I really like the way it flies, and I like what happens when things fly in front of your gun sight. Up next, we have the P-39K1, which is in-game for 1,000 Golden Eagles. And I personally really like the Aerocobras, but I feel like this is the wrong one to get. And the one I'm going to recommend is not for sale right now, but it does appear from time to time, and that'd be the P-39N0, which I know Bismarck and I both adore. And Kobe too. Kobe's actually the one that taught me into the N0 originally. But essentially what an N0 is it has those 430 cals that are on the wings deleted, and it turns like the devil. So this isn't a bad aircraft, but if you can get the N0, I would never fly the N0 over the K1 personally.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you there. We don't have to talk about the Aerocobra too much in Soviet service. They like them, and that's really the end of story. But I would say this is the wrong Aerocobra to get, definitely. At the price tag, it's cheaper than that premium I-16, but it's also somewhat less forgiving, and the K1 is not as good as the N0. And overall, I would say this plane, if you're gonna buy it and then later on you see a sale on the N0, then you're probably going to regret having got this one. So it's a no for me, simply because the N0 is so very good as an Airacobra. And it's at the same battle rating, although a different tier.
Yeah, it's 1,000 Golden Eagles. It doesn't have bombs. It has that 37mm cannon, which you either love or you hate.
Yep.
It's going to be a do not buy for me, or a wait for sell. If you want it as a collector, I would understand. And another reason why I wouldn't recommend the K1 is because of our next aircraft, the P-63A5, which is a hell of a machine. And you can pick it up for 1,600 Golden Eagles. And when I originally first started playing War Thunder, I didn't really give the P-63A5s the time of day. But somebody one day explained to me how good this aircraft was. I think you were in that circle of friends at the time, Bismarck. And when you look at the performance, the rate of climb on this guy, the energy retention, the diving, just the way this thing flies, it actually performs way better than you would think.
Yeah, and it's at a very good battle rating as well for its abilities.
And I think the reason why a lot of people sleep on it or aren't excited about it is because of the cannon and the armament. And if you don't mind the 37mm M4 Browning, I would say this is a buy. I would take the money from the P39K1 and put it into the P63A5.
Pretty much the same sort of opinion as you. We obviously both like the Airacobras and the King Cobras. The ranking for me is still sort of get the P39N0 first, but I guess it's not that often on sale, is it? I mean, it's very rare.
Pops up like every year or so.
Every now and then, yeah. But if you don't want to get that one, or if you don't want to wait, and you see the P63 A5 on sale, definitely get it. I really like this aircraft as well, and I think even full price at the tier, with the abilities it has, once you get to know the aircraft, it would even be a buy then.
Also want to mention it has 450 caliber machine guns and a 500-pound bomb, so you can take it into ground forces and wreak a little bit of havoc. Up next, we have the B-25J30, and it's in game for 1,450 Golden Eagles. This is a tough one for me to talk about. I really do like the B-25s. This aircraft's stock price is way down though due to the recent years of kind of bomber damage models and just the way the game's played and the meta has changed over the years. It's tough, man. Those TA-154s and HE-219s we're talking about, it is a very capable aircraft though. It has 6 50 caliber machine guns forward facing. I just can't recommend it. I want to. I want to recommend it, but the Russians have so many good cast planes, and I just keep thinking about the PE-2 and the TU-2 and all those other guys, and the Tizma, if you're able to get that thing. The PE-8, I mean, the PE-8's at 4.3. Why would you fly the B-25 over the PE-8? I just can't. As much as I want to find a reason to say to buy this thing, I can't. I'd say wait for sell, at least. Wait for sell.
So many better options in the Russian tech tree at this point, and I can talk a little bit about the history of how this aircraft came to the Soviet Union, if you want. They actually went to the Americans and they said, there are 2 designs that you guys have, and we want both of them, and that's the B-26 and the B-25, and we want them in that order. And that was not going to happen. So the Americans instead offered them the A-20, the A-28, that's the Hudson, and the B-25. And they were allowed to test fly those, and they immediately rejected the A-25. This is pretty much the pilot came back and said, not this one. And then they had a quick try with the B-26, but funnily enough, even though it was on top of their list, they also rejected it at that point. And then they had a go at the B-25, and they really liked this aircraft. Mind you, when they actually tested the B-25, apparently the Soviet pilot threw it around the sky, and the people on the ground thought that he had lost his marbles, the stuff that he was pulling in this aircraft. But long story short, they really liked it. They got a fair number of these, and the J30 version that you see here started replacing the earlier versions they got around about 1944. So as a history, the history of this aircraft, really interesting, how it came to the Soviet Union. Always fascinating stuff, but I just can't recommend it.
Makes me sad to say that. Really does. Breaks my heart.
Yeah, makes me sad to say that as well. It's such an awesome aircraft now. I wish I could recommend it, but I just can't.
Up next, we have an aircraft we can recommend, the P-47D-27. Russian premium, which is available for 1,900 golden eagles. And unlike the German one we talked about earlier, this one does have bombs. It can drop 2 500 kilograms and 1 250. I'm going to straight up say it, it's a buy for me. You can use this thing in air, you can use this thing in ground RB. It's a strong performer. If you like P47s, you're going to like it here.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a difficult one for me, because overall I would say P47 go for it, but I do sort of like the fighter lineup that the Soviets have at this tier as well, at this battle rating. There's a lot of good machines in there, and unless you really wanted a P47, you will find a lot of good stuff in their normal tech tree as well. But if you want to grind up that stuff, then this certainly is a good sort of platform to do that.
Well, if I could make a counter argument, a lot of the Russian stuff is a 2 20mm setup for the most part.
Yes.
Like the LA5s and a lot of the Ics will have only 2 cannons. Throw something in the air with 850 cals, it's going to be a little bit easier, and you're going to get probably more success, I would say, to grind up more RP in air and in ground forces.
It is a little bit more forgiving on the weapon side, that is true. The overall, though, I would say for me this is still sort of a wait for sale business. Since, yeah, like I said, I really like sort of the aircraft that you have at this battle rating, that the Russians have at this battle rating. And while I would overall recommend the P47 to fly, maybe wait for a sale on this one. But even a small sale would already suffice for me to pull that trigger.
Up next, we have the SU-6, which is kind of an interesting premium. It's available for 3,850 golden eagles. I'll real quickly talk about what the difference is between this one and the other tech tree SU-6s. This is a single-seat aircraft with no turret, only the pilot. It also has 2 VYA 23mm versus the typical 37mm firepower you'll see on the other SU-6. It's a full 1.0 battering down. The others are like 5.3. This guy's at 4.3. So that is something definitely to consider if you're thinking about picking this up.
Well, the Soviets had problems with that engine on this aircraft, specifically on this aircraft. So it was a little bit of an unhappy marriage. And funnily enough, they later re-engined the aircraft to have the AM-42, which is actually also the first one you find in the tech tree. That's the 1944 prototype, whereas the M71 is from 1942. So that's interesting, sort of how the choice has been made there. But overall, I mean, what the Soviet Union does well is just ground attack. And you have a lot of solid options in the tech tree at a lower battle rating, at a higher battle rating, even sort of at the same battle rating-ish. There might be a little bit of a gap there in what's available. Unless you, for example, bought the P47, of course, which is at the same battle rating. But overall, I would say there are a lot of options out there. So for the price that they're demanding here...
Wait, before you give a judgment, hit modifications and open up that ordnance list.
I mean, it's versatile. Yeah, it's versatile. Still, I would wait for a sale.
Yeah, for me, it's tough. At 3,850 golden eagles, I really do like this aircraft. I do really like the ordnance that it comes with. I do like the 23mm cans personally over the 37mm. The VYAs are not like your typical 23mm. They are huge shells with a ton of powder behind them. This is tough. I want to say buy, but I think once again, it's a wait for sale just because of other aircraft that are coming up. Up next, we have the BE-6, which is a very unique aircraft for 3,850 golden eagles. This was a post-World War II maritime bomber.
Yeah, so this is actually a plane that the Soviets started to produce at that factory I talked about earlier when we had the Catalina, the one at Taganrog. And that one was converted to produce the BE-6 in 1949 and did so for a couple of years, and the plane stayed in service for a considerable amount of time, simply because they were relatively versatile and...
I have the numbers. They built 120 of them, and it flew into the late 1960s.
Oh yeah, there you go. So
I brought knowledge.
Excellent. So overall, it's a cool aircraft. It's a unique design. It's one of those aircraft, again, especially if you're a collector. I mean, probably something you really want to pick up, But for the price that they're asking, nearly 4,000 Golden Eagles, again, it's really hard for me to recommend at that point unless you really are something. It's really the unique value of this aircraft that is the sort
You're
of
not
the
looking at
driving
this right.
factor.
It's a float plane, has 23 millimeter cannons. That's crazy defense armament.
It is.
They're a little low on magazine size, but this thing will punish anything that gets on its 6 or tries to attack it.
That is true.
Has a really good bomb load, has torpedoes. It's a freaking float plane that flies great. It turns really well. It rolls kind of awkward and goofy, but it flies really well. It's kind of slow. It's kind of derpy. I think it's a buy though. You'll have fun this plane.
For me, it's a wait for sale.
It's a buy for me. Up next, we have the FW-190 D9, which is in game for 7,420 Golden Eagles. And as much as I like Doras, there is no way I can recommend that you buy a Russian D9 for 7,420 Golden Eagles. No way. Just no way.
For me, this is the exact same story as with the LA5FN in the German tech tree. It is way overpriced. There's absolutely no reason to spend this money on this aircraft. Even on a sale, it's going to be super expensive. Avoid this one. It's a no.
If you're looking at spending that much money, please use that on the next aircraft we're going to talk about, and that's the Yak 3 VK-107 at 6,090 Golden Eagles. That's still a really expensive aircraft, but it's unique. It's a great performer. As you can tell by the name, it has a VK-107, I believe it was an A engine put into it. It's a all-metal Yak 3, which is different than the wooden components you would find on earlier Yak 3s. This thing flies like a UFO. It has two 20mm cannons.
Yeah, so this was a prototype. It's, like Bo said, an all-metal aircraft, which for the Soviets and especially the Yakolev line was sort of a first.
But it wasn't technically a prototype. They built like 50 of them, and they ran them for a year or so, and they had really good performance, but the VK-107A didn't work that well in the Yak 3, and they decided to put it in the Yak 9, which it was more suited for. It kept overheating. It was fantastic in the aircraft, but it kind of kept overheating and melting down.
Well, they also made some changes to the guns, and they had a smaller fuel capacity on this one. First flight 1946, and the work terminated the same year. It's a really strong aircraft, and if you have that money to spend, like Bo said, don't get the Focke-Wulf 190, get this one. But overall, it's still a steep price, and at this point we're talking about a lot of money. So for the average consumer, I would say wait for a sale, but if you're really sort of an avid War Thunder player, then strongly consider this one.
If you're going to grind out your rank 4 aircraft, this is a buy. If you're looking for a serious competitor at higher tier propeller aircraft, it's going to be a buy for me. This thing flies too good to say otherwise. And lastly, we have the MiG 17 AS, which is a pack that is available on War Thunder, PlayStation, and Xbox for $49.99. Comes with 2,000 Golden Eagles and 15 days of premium. Now, the MiG 17 AS, I've been struggling a lot on whether to recommend a wait or a buy on. The AS version is kind of a weird version of the MiG 17. Originally, it's supposed to be kind of like a air interceptor version, but then eventually became a fighter bomber. It does get 2 R3S air-to-air missiles, but it'll lose the 16 unguided rockets that you have in the tech tree. It does have those 2 really hard-hitting unguided rockets on it. It is a swept-wing MiG fighter. It's a really strong performer.
Yeah, the dilemma that I'm having here as well is sort of, it's essentially the only premium at this tier that the Soviets have. I mean, there is the LA-174 on the marketplace, but beyond that, the MiG-17 AS is essentially the only choice you have. And as you said, it sort of became a fighter bomber. The AS suffix there is for the AS-21 weapon system, and 170 of these aircraft were built, with also some modifications to the hardpoints to actually be carrying the AS-21s. Hence the name also of the weapon system that was installed. And like you said, you can add sidewinders. Sorry, did I say sidewinders? I meant the R3s, of course. And
You're making a joke about how it was a copy.
Sorry?
You're making a joke how it was a copy of an American weapon system.
Well, I'm a German. I don't make jokes.
Which then the Chinese copied, so there's a copy of a copy of a copy in the game.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's going to hurt some heads.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's really tough because this is sort of the choice that is out there for you if you want to have something at that battle rating and if you want to have a jet to grind stuff out.
It's a good plane. It just doesn't give me enough reasons to get excited about it. It's not unique enough, I would say. I asked a lot of people what they thought about the Mk 17AS just to kind of feel out how players are doing with it and what their opinion of it is. And almost every single one of them said, well, it has an afterburner. And that's the reason why a lot of them wanted to pick it up. It doesn't have an afterburner. It's the exact same engine from what I can tell that is in the normal Mk 17 in the tech tree.
Yeah, it's the VK1 from Klimov.
I will say buy though, just simply for the fact that it does get air-to-air missiles over the tech tree Mk 17. It's a buy for me if you're looking for a top tier jet that has premium, that has air-to-air missiles in the Russian tech tree. Thank you for joining me, Bismarck. It's always great to have you on the channel. I love talking airplanes with you. It's been one of my favorite things to do. I'm glad we got to do this.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks very much for having me. And thanks obviously also for making all these guides. It's a lot of work that you're putting into them. So if you guys are enjoying these, please let Bo know. And, you know, he does put a lot of work into these. And, of course, remember, there is also that affiliate store that is available for a 3% discount down below from your purchase. And 3% also goes to Bowtime, so consider it.
In our next video, we will be discussing British aircraft. Until then, thanks for watching, and have a great day.
See you. Bye-bye.